started if we may.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I grew up in a small town in Maine, which is on the other side of the country. And growing up and reading my sci-fi magazines and reading about the internet as it was just getting started, I was really enthralled with this idea that we were going to have, that technology was going to bring us all together, and that it was going to allow me to connect to people far outside of my little community, people maybe on the other side of the world. But recently, I've begun to wonder whether that's actually the effect that the internet is having for many people. It may not be quite as connective in some ways as we thought. And we may be stuck in our own little local communities more than we think we are when we travel around online. And so I want to tell you about how the phenomenon of personalization is changing the way that people get information and really shaping what people know about the world in interesting ways. So I first started thinking about this one morning when I logged on to Facebook. And I have sort of left-leaning political views, but I had just gone on this sort of campaign to befriend people who thought differently from me. I really wanted to meet people who had a variety of viewpoints. And I had added them as Facebook friends. And so when I logged on this morning, I was expecting to see something like this: my liberal and conservative friends happily chattering away together, sharing information from each of their worlds. And I was really surprised because my conservative friends weren't appearing. It looked more like this. They had disappeared. And I wondered, why is this? Why is Facebook only showing me the views of people who I tend to agree with anyway? So as it turns out, Facebook monitors every click, every user engagement, every time you look at someone's photo. And it had noticed that I was communicating more and engaging more and clicking more on the links of people who I tended to agree with. And so it had decided, without consulting me about it, to edit my news feed in a way that actually ended up just reinforcing and reflecting my own views. And as it turns out, that kind of algorithmic sorting in which people's behavior is monitored and then they're fed information that tends to reinforce their views isn't unique to Facebook at all. It's sweeping the web. And so, I started doing some research. So, if you talk to folks here in Silicon Valley, they'll say this phenomenon of personalization is one of the big things that's going on the internet. Almost every single major website uses personalization in some way or in one way or another. And the sort of root cause of this isn't hard to divine. It's a simple problem. There's too much information. Eric Schmidt from Google likes to present this statistic, which is that if you take all of the information created in human history from the beginning of time, every photograph, every painting on a cave wall, every conversation, and you were to translate that into computer bits and bytes, you'd end up with about 5 exabytes of data. And the challenge is that that same amount of data poured online in 2 days in 2011. So we have this massive flood of information, and people need a way to sort through it all and to figure out how to sift out the little nuggets of gold in this very fast-moving stream. And so, engineers got at this project and started developing algorithms. And the very simple way that they started with this was just doing this process that we all recognize from Amazon.com or things like it. If you like this, you'll like that. And this is basically looking at clusters of people and clusters of products and trying to use them to predict what people will like. Now, at a basic level, this is very simple. If you like a certain kind of romantic comedy movie, you'll like another one. But it gets very interesting very quickly the more data that you have, because you begin to be able to make correlations that transcend the, the sort of zone that you're gathering the data in. So for example, you can infer, if you have enough data, that if you prefer milk with your meal rather than wine, that you're more likely to be politically conservative. It's actually true. Or you can infer that if your desktop has more icons on it, that actually turns out to have a predictive impact on your political views. So as it turns out, with about 5 data points, if you can isolate 5 key variables, you can begin to predict consumer preferences 80% of the time reasonably correctly across almost any area, and you have this massive predictive ability. And so this is one thing, this started in the realm of consumer products, but what's been happening recently is that it's been moving into the realm of information. And it's not just if I like this movie, I'll like that movie. It's if I like this news story, I'll like that news story. And somewhat more concerning, if I like this fact, I'll like that fact. And that, I think, is the world that we're moving into. The best way to illustrate this is with Google. Most of us think of Google as this kind of authoritative source. You go to Google to find out what the best answer on the web is for your query. But over the last several years, Google has moved very rapidly in a different direction. We all see a different Google, even when we search for the same thing now. And when I first heard about this, I wasn't even sure that I believed it. So I asked a bunch of friends to Google a search term and send me a screenshot of what they got at the same time. So here's my friend Scott's Google search. I asked people to search for Egypt. This was right after the Arab Spring. And here's my friend Daniel's Google search. And when you put them side by side, you don't even have to read the results to see how different the results were that these two people got searching for the same term at the exact same time in the same city with similar demographics, right? And when you do look at the content here, at what's different about what the content they got, you see that Scott got lots of information about the Arab Spring, about the political consequences, but Daniel didn't have anything about the Arab Spring on the whole first page of search results. He just got travel tips. So what these two people are seeing through Google is a very different world in a way. One of them sees a lot of unrest, a lot of political activity. The other one sees, it's a nice time to go to the pyramids. So if you talk to folks, about what this is all about, the word that keeps coming up is relevance. That's the new kind of holy grail in Silicon Valley, to find things that are relevant to you. And you can find almost any any software person talking about this and how this is going to be the future. A Yahoo vice president says the future of the web is about personalization. And Eric Schmidt from Google says it'll soon be very hard for people to watch or consume something that has not in some way been tailored for them. That's a big change from the broadcast media that most of us grew up with. And I think, really it was Mark Zuckerberg who put the political consequences of this most eloquently, although I'm not sure that was what he was intending to get at. A journalist asked him, sort of what's so special about the Facebook newsfeed? Why is this a better way of consuming information than anything else? And he said, well, a squirrel dying in front of your house may be more relevant to your interests right now than people dying in Africa. So we have this, increasingly we're living in this information world in which we're surrounded by a kind of membrane of personalizing filters. And increasingly this is not just happening in product websites, it's happening in news websites. Most of the major news websites are now experimenting with ways of doing this kind of predictive personalization. It's increasingly hard to escape seeing something that's reflected back to you on the expectation that you're going to be interested in it wherever you go online. And so the interesting thing about this bubble that it creates around you of information that these filters think will be interesting to you is that it's a passive experience. You're not necessarily deciding what's going to get filtered in or out. And you don't see what you're missing. It's an unknown unknown. Now, in some ways, the media has always done this. That's kind of the function of the media, and people seek out media sources that affirm their own views. But this is a little bit different because it's happening on a person-by-person basis. So you can't, your internet looks different from a person sitting right next to you. And unlike the old media where you can kind of guess at what the editorial rule is, where you can say, okay, I'm turning on Fox News or I'm turning on MSNBC, and I kind of know on what basis people are making decisions about what gets edited in and what gets edited out, and therefore I can kind of correct for the bias of that filter. We don't know on what basis Google or Facebook are showing us information. We don't know who they think we are, and therefore we really don't know what we're missing. So I want to talk about three challenges that are presented by this kind of new personalized information universe. So one is the obvious problem that we not only is the information that we're getting increasingly sort of filtered through this personalized lens, but we're not always aware of the kind of distortion that that creates. When I was promoting the book, I was on a radio show in a part of the United States, and it was a call-in show, and the host was asking people to Google Barack Obama and read off on the air what they were finding. So a lot of people Google Barack Obama and call in, and they're getting kind of a standard set of results: the White House, Wikipedia, and so forth. And then a guy calls in and says, it's the darndest thing. Every one of my search results are about the birth certificate and whether Obama is actually a citizen of the United States. And what's fascinating about that is not just that it happened, but that he had no idea how different the view that he was getting from Google was from the view that everyone else was getting from Google. So you can live in a sort of many standard deviations off of the norm and not even know that your information environment is distorted in this way. This also affects what kinds of information spread. So on Facebook, the primary way that information travels across Facebook is that people hit the like button. And the like button sort of increases the velocity of that information, and increases the likelihood that other people are going to see it on Facebook. Now, like, obviously, is not a neutral word. Like is a positive word, and it has a very particular valence. And what this means is that, news like I just ran a marathon or I just baked a cake gets seen by people a lot in Facebook. News that's a downer, the genocide in Darfur continues for 11th year, that has a hard time propagating as quickly across Facebook because it's not very likable. So there are these kind of distorting effects that we get as we increasingly live in this personalized world. The second piece is what the anthropologist Dana Boyd calls the psychological equivalent of obesity. And this is best illustrated by a study that was done of Netflix user data. Netflix is a movie service in which you kind of add movies to a list, and it sends movies out to you one by one. And what this team was looking at was, which movies moved to the top of the list more quickly and which movies stayed on the list but lower down. And what they discovered was that big blockbuster hits like Iron Man just move very quickly out to people's households. And more contemplative documentaries like the movie Waiting for Superman can just take a long time in getting out to people's homes. So what's going on here? What was this about? Well, basically what they realized was what we're seeing here is a kind of tug of war between two inner selves. You have the sort of more impulsive present case self that gets home from work and just wants to watch something that's entertaining. and you have the more aspirational, future-oriented self that wants to have seen all of the great works of French cinema. And that basically these two selves are in tension. And that what old media typically did was kind of balance those two selves. So you kind of lure people in with something sensationalistic, something a little, that's kind of dessert, candy, and then you also draw attention to some of the issues that really matter. But the challenge is that because the filters that are increasingly driving a lot of the way that people consume information just look at what people click first, you can actually end up in this kind of, instead of getting a balanced information diet, you can end up in this world of information junk food, in which the only stories that you see are the stories that people click on a lot, which tend to be the more trivial ones. And meanwhile, the issues that matter are lost. So I think the final piece here is just to acknowledge that really what we're talking about in a way is a matter of control. We're turning over control over what we pay attention to computer algorithms, to code. And that code is increasingly doing the heavy work of figuring out what's relevant to us and what's not. And for that reason, we have to pay a lot of attention to sort of what the dynamics and incentives of those algorithms are. What are they trying to promote? What are they trying to not promote? And who are they working for? Are they designed to get me to click through on an advertisement? Or are they designed to get me to be a well-informed citizen? Eric Schmidt from Google says, what people want is for Google to tell them what to do next. And that's a lot of control to hand over to a piece of code to make decisions for us. So what I realized, sort of backing up from the details here, is that there was this kind of mythology about the internet that I had bought into that I think was quite wrong, and yet it still persists even today. The mythology is that in the 20th century, there were these information gatekeepers. They were the broadcasters. They were the producers, the newspaper editors. And they decided what information got out to the public. And the internet came along, and it swept them out of the way. And now anyone can communicate with anyone. We're living in this totally decentralized world. But in fact, that's not really what, if you diagram the flow of information online, that's not what it looks like. There still are gatekeepers. There's just a new set of gatekeepers, and instead of being people, they're code. And the code is doing the exact same kinds of things. It's making the same kinds of decisions about what people see and what people don't see, about what's going to be relevant to you, about what is news. But it's doing it without necessarily the sense of sort of civic ethics that the best of the old gatekeepers had. So, part of, I think, the solution to this is just recognizing that, we really have to decide what we mean by relevant and pay attention to what the selection rule is for what is meant by relevance. And that we also have to make sure that, if we want people to be well informed about what's going on in the world, that they're also paying attention to things that are important and uncomfortable and challenging. That when I log onto Facebook, I don't just see views that reflect my own. And I think this is important not just because it's a better experience for a user, but because actually we need the internet to live up to the potential that it has, the positive potential to connect people with different ways of thinking, to connect people across nations and across ideological systems. And that if we aren't careful, instead of being that massively new connective medium, instead of breaking down some of the boundaries that kept us kind of siloed, that we could find ourselves increasingly surrounded by a bubble, that we could find ourselves in a web of one. So that's my thought for you today, and I'd be happy to take questions or comments for a little while.
That'd be a good name for a play. Mike
Can you hear me okay? I'm going to probably not roam much, but I'd like to not only be behind the podium. Thank you, and it sounds like you've had a pretty good day so far. Let's see, I've got to get used to my signal here. My main man in the back. How many of you use Twitter, either personally or for good number, but more could be coming on board. We'll see at the end of the talk. Twitter, as you may know, is a real-time publishing platform, short form, short character, and it was designed originally to be accommodated by SMS and simple feature cell phones. So we haven't changed that. That's an important, very important component of how Twitter operates and its value. And we believe, I'll step away from that, we believe that Twitter facilitates the open exchange of information. And I'll talk about some examples, and I'm sure you know of some, where Twitter has been instrumental in conveying and informing the world in real time as events are unfolding. Next. So our growth, as Stan mentioned, Twitter started in 2006, a very small, San Francisco startup, which frankly, whatever was said in the business plan turned out not to matter, because the people who took to Twitter early defined a lot of its characteristics we see today and started using it in more ways than I think the folks at Twitter would have ever anticipated. And as a result of that, I mean, that to credit the Twitter users is important, because that explains the kind of growth that we've seen over the years and continue to see. It's important to know particularly how much Twitter has spread outside the U.S. What started as maybe a fun idea within the San Francisco sort of tech scene it has resonated throughout the world. And 70% of Twitter use today is outside the U.S. I think Twitter is available, twitter.com is available in 28 languages at the moment. And we have a large volunteer translator community around the world who are eagerly adding more languages all the time. Next. Oh, I said that. So for your purposes, I think this might be of interest, that not only are people on the ground in the streets using Twitter, but we've seen over the last, I'd say 2-3 years, quite heavy adoption by government agencies, heads of government, heads of state, many kinds of sort of political and cultural dignitaries, religious dignitaries, the Dalai Lama, the Pope, the Queen. Lots of people are doing it now, whether they all are tweeting personally or not. Someone is looking after their account and representing them. We encourage, direct tweeting, but where not possible, if someone is conveying for that personage or agency, that's fantastic, because they're sharing more information more frequently. So a few basics on Twitter for those of you who aren't up to speed. Next. Let's take just a single account. In this case, Johnny Doe USA. The @ symbol in front of a name or a word with no space in front of it is the Twitter username or the Twitter handle. So here's Johnny Doe. Johnny Doe USA is interested in following a variety of Twitter accounts. Speaker Boehner, CNN for News, Lance Armstrong, also a Volvo fan. So Johnny Doe has a range of interest, only constrained by him and what he's interested in following news about. Thanks. Meanwhile, all of those other Twitter accounts are also following any number of other accounts and people, right? So it's an asynchronous system. It's not like Facebook in this way. So you don't have to have a one-to-one relationship with someone in order to see what's going on. And this is especially valuable, of course, for both agencies and entities and organizations, as well as very well-known figures, political figures, heads of state, civic figures, and so on. So you start to see this kind of network effect that grows between Johnny Doe and the people he follows and the people they follow. Meanwhile, Johnny Doe has followers, and his followers are interested in what he has to say, and they, by the nature of the sort of public Twitter account platform where you can see who someone else is following, you might say, oh, I didn't know that Volvo had an account. I like Volvo too. I didn't know that CNN had a separate one for breaking news. I'm gonna follow that too. So if you only know Johnny Doe and nothing else, then you begin to see the sort of lines of information and interest that emanate, from him, from his account, for people who are following him. Next. So here, I'll go over to this side. So this is what a Twitter stream or a Twitter account would look like, a timeline. And this is Johnny Doe's, or someone like that, right? So this is the latest tweet from CNN Live. There's one from Best Buy. There's one from CNN Breaking, which is a different account. Individual people, Volvo, Speaker Boehner. That's what Johnny Doe is seeing in his account. If you went to Johnny Doe's account yourself, which you could do because it's public, you would see that stream also. So then you begin to say, oh, I didn't know, again, Speaker Boehner, oh, that looks interesting. Click on the link. Click on the account. Maybe I'll follow that too. Or maybe I'll see what else they say to see if it's interesting enough to follow. And you can do that very quickly from the stream view. So for 140 characters, you'd be surprised how much information is packed into that little space. Maybe you wouldn't. In the case of, here's one tweet, right? CNN Live has an avatar, and it's their brand, so you can tell it's CNN. Their announcement about what they're going to cover, presumably today, the Secretary General's talk at the UN. And if you click on the On CNN link, presumably you're going to be able to go right there and watch it. You can also, you like this tweet, you say, oh, I want to remind myself about that. I'm going to favorite it, star it, so I can come back to it later in my stream. I'm going to retweet it, share it with all my followers so they can see that this is happening. I'm going to reply to CNN to say, what time is that at Pacific time? Or whatever you'd like to do. You can also see how many others have retweeted that same information. So you begin to see, again, the network effect, that sort of richness of information and the levels of it that go out. If they had a video, if they had a photo, you'd see that as well as links to a web page with more information. Then speaking of video, so there it is. In this case, you can tune right in and watch it live if you catch the right time, and see that, and you don't have to leave Twitter. You just can watch from the tweet, from the stream, and that makes it very useful for especially on the go and on the fly information. Next. So hashtags sometimes seem mysterious or confusing to people. It's one of the customs of Twitter that, again, grew up from people using it. People using it suggested this as a way to follow kind of a conversation thread if you're used to Gmail or one of the other systems that has that kind of view. So if you were to simply go to twitter.com and type in the hashtag symbol, no space, UNGA, people are adding that to their tweets. So then you'd get a stream of everyone who has referenced hashtag UNGA, and you'd see the range of conversation that is going on about the UN General Assembly right there. A bit of shorthand to just say, you know, I'm here, I'm watching it, I'm having a reaction to it, I have a question about it. All those things will appear in that hashtag stream, which is, again, very easy to see. These are not people that you follow or who follow you. This is all just people talking about that. That's the conversation going on Twitter. Next. Oh, favorites. Okay, I mentioned favorites, starring the favorites. So this is what a list of favorites would be, that you could always go back to. I'm forever starring things in my stream that I want to read later. So for me, it's just a reference of things I want to go back and look at, read more thoroughly, pass along, do something with that I was too busy to stop and look at closely while I was on the go. And that is, oh yes, sorry, retweet. So you like that, you want to let people know that the UN General Assembly